Hello, I'm Julia Somerville with the ITN World News. We'll be bringing you a roundup of the top international stories. The headlines: government troops move in to crush Yugoslavia's rebel republics. America tells the United Nations Iraq is still building nuclear weapons. And 5,000 arrests in South Africa's Operation Blitz. First, Yugoslav army troops have moved into the breakaway Republic Slovenia 2 days after it declared independence. Yugoslav tanks smashed through makeshift roadblocks of buses, trucks and cars, ringing the breakaway republic's capital city of Ljubljana. Several border crossings to Austria were sealed off, including the main railway connection. The Slovenian President Milan Kučan warned that his republic will use all means available to defend itself. Leaflets have been dropped over Slovenia calling on residents to stay in their homes. The leaflets finished with the message, "Any resistance will be crushed." The Yugoslav army effectively declared war on rebel Slovenia, sending tanks through the republic and warning that combat troops will crush all resistance. The Slovene presidency called on all citizens, officers and soldiers to resist the aggression against their own people. The US Secretary of State, James Baker, who's just returned from Yugoslavia, warned that political disintegration could have tragic consequences.
The likelihood, I think, of more violence, the likelihood of bloodshed and disintegration is growing. It is truly a powder keg situation, and one that is deteriorating even as we meet here this evening.
Mr. Baker clearly found the Republicans hard to negotiate with.
But notwithstanding some rhetorical flourishes during the course of those conversations, I found a distinct air of unreality, an inability on the part of several of the Republic leaders to understand what I think and what we think are the dangerous consequences of their actions.
Near the entrance to Ljubljana airport, a bloodbath involving members of the Federal Army and the Slovenian Territorial Army was averted after the leaders of both armies decided to negotiate their differences. The standoff involved a group of about a dozen Slovenian territorial troops with a tank and a group of soldiers belonging to the Federal Army. Heavily armed members of the Territorial Army, all crouched on the ground, were given orders by their captain to shoot at Federal troops who were about 30 meters away. As soon as the tank edged forward and got ready to attack, the Serbian officer ordered it to stop, averting the clash. Both Serbian and Slovenian officers then decided to negotiate and part ways peacefully. The United Nations Security Council has been discussing Iraq's secret weapons program, which the United States claims is continuing, despite the extensive damage Saddam Hussein's military machine suffered during the Gulf War. Washington maintains that Baghdad is lying about its nuclear capability and has urged the UN to act.
Evidence like radioactivity on the clothes of some of the human shield hostages held at strategic sites by Saddam Hussein in the early days of the war. More recently, spy satellites detected signs of uranium enrichment going on at the Abu Ghraib base west of Baghdad. That's where a team of UN inspectors was denied access on Sunday.
Only after Iraq had several days to remove equipment and material did Iraqi authorities finally permit an inspection team to enter this site. The team found the site empty.
At the United Nations in New York, the 5 permanent members of the Security Council met both in closed, then in open session to hear the accusations. During the war, Allied bombs destroyed the bulk of Iraq's nuclear weapons facilities. A UN resolution requires Iraq to cooperate in dismantling any surviving installations. A defector has already told US intelligence that Iraq has 4 nuclear research plants the Allies didn't know about. Iraq's ambassador to the UN denies any deception.
Don't forget, the bombardment has stopped against Iraq, but the campaign of disinformation still continues.
The alleged deception casts doubt on Saddam Hussein's intention to fulfill his post-war promises, including those made to the frightened Kurdish population. That's why it's gloves off as far as Washington is concerned in this first major post-war confrontation.
We think that there has to be full compliance with the United Nations resolutions.
The incident will ensure that Washington is more determined than ever that sanctions should be maintained until the total Iraqi nuclear infrastructure has been dismantled. And just in case diplomacy doesn't work, President Bush is said to be discussing possible military options.
In South Africa, nearly 5,000 people have been arrested in a wide-ranging crackdown against crime. In a police operation involving 60,000 officers, 80% of the country's police force, suspected murderers, drunken drivers, illegal aliens and trespassers were caught and taken away for questioning.
Operation Blitz was launched overnight. For 8 hours, the police set up roadblocks and conducted house-to-house searches throughout the country, but as in previous operations, concentrated their efforts on the black townships. They searched 8,000 homes and 30,000 vehicles. More than 600 people were arrested on drugs charges and 45 people on suspicion of murder. By 3 o'clock in the morning, nearly 5,000 people were in custody, most charged with trespassing or being illegal aliens. Police said they recovered weapons and stolen vehicles. South Africa's crime rate has been rising alarmingly in recent years, in both black and white neighbourhoods. In white areas, all homes are protected by high walls, elaborate security systems, guard dogs, and are patrolled by private security companies at night. But the authorities clearly believe that's not enough, and the police chief in charge of this operation said one purpose was to heighten public awareness of crime. He added that more operations of the kind could be expected. South Africa already has 100,000 of its 39 million people behind bars. That gives the country the second highest per capita prison population in the world after the United States.
In Hong Kong, the Legislative Council has voted to abolish the death penalty. Despite an increase in violent crime, capital punishment hasn't been used for 25 years, and there's strong public support for abolishing it completely. People fear it might be abused by the Chinese when they take over in 1997.
Hong Kong hasn't used the death penalty for 25 years. Violent crime is increasing, but there's strong public support for taking capital punishment out of the statute books. Martin Lee, Hong Kong's leading Liberal councillor, proposed the bill.
When one looks forward to 1997, one is no longer sure that the chief executive, who will take over from the governor of Hong Kong, will or will not exercise his discretion to commute the death penalty in the same way as it is done here, or whether he would not commute any death penalty at all.
The fear has grown since the Tiananmen Square massacre. Hong Kong strongly supported the students' bid for more freedom and mourned their deaths. China takes over in 5.5 years. It's to be one country with two systems. Abolishing the death penalty, though, directly challenges China.
The sort of political climate we have here vis-a-vis China has been rather cold. So China may have something to say. I hope that it will not, because after all, this is really internal matters for Hong Kong. It has nothing to do with defense of foreign affairs, for example, so that it certainly does not impinge on foreign affairs or defense affairs, and would not be a matter for the central government, even according to the terms of the basic law.
It's now up to the governor, Sir David Wilson, to make the change into law. The Chinese are already pushing to have a say in how Hong Kong's run, and they certainly won't like losing the death penalty.
Some business news now. Germany's annual rate of inflation went up by 0.5% in June to 3.5%. It's the highest annual rate since April 1983 and reflects the high cost of German unification. The rise will put pressure on the Bundesbank to raise interest rates. In Japan, more than 1,700 companies have held simultaneous shareholder meetings with heavy police protection in an effort to dilute the threat of gangster groups. Japanese mobsters have attempted to extort money by threatening disruption of annual meetings unless they're paid off. Australia's Labour Party has reaffirmed its policy of limiting the country's uranium mining. Australia has 30% of the world's uranium reserves, but only produces 10% of the world's output. Prime Minister Bob Hawke had backed a plan to allow an expansion of uranium mining, but this was rejected at his Labour Party's annual conference. And that was the ITN World News. From all of us here, goodbye.